Hello, I'm Lilla, death enthusiast, and today we'll be discussing the age-old question, what should we do with our fleshy, corporeal husks once we die? Now, this is a question that has been plaguing humanity since, well, the literal dawn of humanity, and what we do with our corpses does make a difference. For example, last year alone, cremation was responsible for 6.8 million tons of carbon emissions, and traditional burials used enough wood to build 4.5 million houses. In today's market, there are so many body disposal methods that it's important that you make an informed choice before you die because, well, once you're dead, you don't get to make that decision. To aid in your decision, I'll be rating some of the most popular after-death care options in the US. Traditional burial, traditional cremation, green burial, and alkaline hydrolysis, which I will be referring to as water cremation for the duration of this video, as it rolls off the tongue just a little bit better. Each after-death care option will be ranked in the following categories: cost, environmental impact, and the treatment of the body in accordance to cultural norms. In each category, a body disposal method can earn up to 4 points. 1 point being the worst available after-death care option in the US, and 4 points being the best legal available after-death care option in the US. In theory, the body disposal method with the most points, collectively, should be the best, but it is important to note that the objectively best after-death care option in the US may not be the best after-death care option in the US for you. For example, the Roman Catholic faith dictates the faithful must be laid to rest in a sacred place, that is a cemetery, or in certain cases, a church. So that's a no-go on the burlap sack in a woods burial for all you Catholics out there. Before we truly begin, I'd like to define each of our after-death care options for those of you viewers who may not be quite so familiar with the macabre as I. First, traditional burials. Our traditional burial describes an embalming, viewing, placement in a standard casket, burial in a grave liner on a public cemetery plot, and marking of the plot with a tombstone. Our traditional cremation,
as described by CANA, the Cremation Association of North America, is the use of flames and heat to reduce human remains to bone fragments or cremated remains. This is completed with a machine called a cremator.
Note that the fate of the ashes, whether scattered or kept in an urn, is left ambiguous. Our green burial is the process in which the body is neither cremated nor prepared with chemicals. It is placed in a biodegradable coffin or a shroud and interred without a concrete burial vault. The goal is complete decomposition of the body and its natural return to the soil. And finally, our water cremation defines the process in which a body is placed in a steel chamber along with a mixture of water and potassium hydroxide. Air pressure inside the vaults is increased and the temperature is raised. And then the corpse is reduced to bones that are then crushed into a fine white powder. On to our first category, cost. According to the Smithsonian, the average cost of a traditional burial is between $7,000 and $10,000 US. According to the US Census Bureau, the average yearly income for a single American full-time worker is $41,232 US. So even on the low end, a burial for grandma is going to cost at least 1 month's salary. This cost can be especially devastating for low-income families where the death was sudden and they did not have time to prepare or save the funds. For individuals wishing to bury their bodies near a city, burial plot prices come at a premium. The Funeral Consumer Alliance suggests that just the price of a burial plot near a city may run you between $5,000 and $10,000 US. People who choose to cremate their remains but decide to store the urn in a cemetery, as opposed to in the home or scattering the ashes, also face some of the same exorbitant fees, though the actual process of cremation only runs you about $1,000 to $2,000 US. The Funeral Consumer Alliance warns that space in a grave liner may cost an additional $500 to $1,000 US. Foregoing body processing altogether, green burials can be a little bit more expensive than traditional cremations. However, due to the omission of an embalming, traditional caskets, concrete vaults, and tombstones, they are far less expensive than traditional burials. They tend to run in the $1,000 to $4,000 US price range. And at burial conservation sites like Ramsey's Creek, proceeds from the funerals go to restoring the land and funding local nonprofits. Finally, water cremations, while technically costing the funeral home more than a traditional cremation, are sold to consumers at the same $1,000 to $2,000 US price bracket. According to John McQueen, president of Anderson McQueen Funeral Homes, they, meaning the funeral homes, don't want the price to be the objection. They'd rather see, for sure, if the consumer likes and wants it. As water cremations are the newest and most experimental after-death option on the list, the funeral homes are trying to get a feel for the consumer demand. This means that prices may fluctuate, and while the cost of water cremation is currently comparatively low, that might not always be the case. Using this information, traditional cremations are the most cost-effective body disposal method in the $1,000 to $2,000 price range. They are even cheaper if you avoid the grave liner and opt for either storing the urn at home or scattering the ashes. This first place spot earns traditional cremation 4 points on the leaderboard. The second most cost-effective after-death care option is water cremation, also in the $1,000 to $2,000 price range. The barrier between water cremation and first place is the unreliability in the price point. If and when the method becomes popular, the prices will rise. But for now, give that sucker 3 points on the leaderboard. Green burials are in third place because, while some proceeds may go to charity, the $1,000 to $4,000 price bracket is notably higher than its superiors, and it is not the best option for those purely looking for the cheapest, legal way to dispose of a body. In fourth place, we have traditional burials. At their starting price of $7,000 to $10,000 US, they are far and away the most expensive option on this list. This can be especially devastating for low-income families, and depending where you live and the specifics of your funeral, these astronomical prices can be inflated even further. Despite this, I will give traditional burials its obligatory 1 point on the leaderboard, because they are technically cheaper than the court case you'll be funding if you leave grandma's dead body rotting in your closet. Environmental impact is a really huge factor to consider when ranking after-death care options, because as long as humanity is alive, we will need to dispose of our dead. Any good body disposal method needs to be sustainable enough to be viable for the foreseeable future. For example, a burial practice involving, we'll say, allocating a single piece of land for a single body forever and always is not sustainable, as the land we have is finite, and the number of bodies we can anticipate to have, presuming that humanity does not cease to exist, is not. And lack of space isn't the only environmental red flag with traditional burials. The Funeral Consumer Alliance estimates that each year, the U.S. cemeteries bury over 30 million board feet of hardwood and 90,000 tons of steel in caskets, 17,000 tons of steel and copper in vaults, and 1.6 million tons of reinforced concrete in vaults. The wood alone is enough to build 4.5 million homes. In a world where we're already trying to limit our deforestation and use of finite resources, cutting down thousands of trees only to bury them in the ground and never see them again seems like a frivolous expenditure. Additionally, the mere process of creating cemeteries for burials requires the clearing of trees and destruction of habitats. The maintenance of cemeteries primarily uses pesticides in large quantities of water. This has a terrible effect on the environment, and the pesticides and fertilizer have been observed leaking into groundwater. Finally, chemicals used to embalm are known carcinogens. Every body an embalmer embalms puts that embalmer at risk, and these known carcinogens have been observed leaching into the air and soil. Of course, the environmental truth of traditional burials has been known for years. So many ego-conscious individuals decide to instead opt for cremation as a greener alternative. Well, ego-conscious individuals, you have been conned again by the funeral industry. Cremations, while technically less harmful than traditional burials, are still responsible for approximately 2/100ths of the world's carbon emissions. This may not seem like a lot, but it actually equates to about 6.8 million metric tons of carbon emissions a year, just from cremations. According to The Atlantic, a single cremation requires about 2 SUV tanks worth of fuel. Again, in a world with a shockingly finite supply of fossil fuels, it is not sustainable for all future corpses to use 2 SUV tanks worth of fuel. The burning of dental compounds and medical aids during incineration also releases mercury and other toxic chemicals, and families who decide to keep their urn in a columbarium, it's a fancy word for the urn storage things in cemeteries, also contribute to the negative environmental impacts of cemetery maintenance. Green burials are, as suggested by their name, an eco-friendly solution to after-death care, and the only option on this list that has a net positive environmental impact. No chemicals are used to embalm, no trees are cleared for burial sites, bodies are only buried in a simple shroud or biodegradable wooden coffin, and grave sites are left unmarked and reused once a body has fully decomposed. The green burial process is sustainable for years to come, and the natural recomposition of bodies in green burials actually leaves the surrounding soil richer and more fertile. Sites of natural burials are also protected from urbanization and treated as nature conservations. It is important to note that, contrary to popular belief, the decomposing bodies in green burials are not dug up by animals, nor do they contaminate water supply. The final method, water cremation, is kind of the middle-of-the-road option. Though it does use 90% less energy than its traditional cremation counterpart, it also requires 300 gallons of water per body. Though the process can be made greener by using gray water, dissolving grandma in dirty dishwater has been a hard sell for funeral homes. On a positive note, the leftover liquids, including acids and soaps from body fat, are non-toxic and safe to dispose of through the normal wastewater system. And though this next option is currently unpopular, the resulting sludge makes a fantastic fertilizer. Okay, first place goes to green burials. Only option here with a net positive environmental impact, helps fertilize the soil, helps preserve natural land. Second place is water cremation. As the name suggests, it requires a lot of water, but it can be made cleaner by more open-minded consumers. Third place, traditional cremations. Emits a lot of CO2, requires fossil fuels, adds to the greenhouse effect. Overall, not great, but not as bad as fourth place, traditional burials. Just so many negative environmental impacts of traditional burials, but the most problematic is that our Earth just does not have enough space. Gauging the treatment of the body in accordance to cultural norms is an extremely difficult thing to do objectively. Every culture and really every person has a different individualized idea about how they want their body to be treated when they die. For example, the Hebrew faith prohibits embalming, and all followers of Hinduism are supposed to have their bodies cremated when they die. For this reason, methods in this category will not be judged on how well they can appeal to everyone's standards, rather how much potential they have to appeal to the widest audience. In this respect, there's really only one contender for this category: green burials. While traditional burial, cremation, and water cremation are more like instruction manuals, green burials are akin to a choose-your-own-adventure book. As the NFDA puts it, there are many shades of green possible when planning a green funeral or natural burial. These come based on your preferences, available funeral home services, cemetery capabilities, and local rules and regulations. If you're a Roman Catholic and require your body buried in a cemetery, you can forgo embalming, opt for a biodegradable casket, and be buried in a bottomless cemetery vault. This is still green burial. If you're Luke Perry, you can have a woods burial in a completely biodegradable burial garment made up of mushroom. This is still a green burial. As long as the body naturally decomposes, this is still a green burial. By their narrow definitions, a cremation is only a cremation if your body is put in a cremator. A water cremation is only a water cremation if you're dissolved in a vault with water and potassium hydroxide. A traditional burial is only a traditional burial if you're embalmed and buried in a cemetery plot. Green burials encompass a broad range of practices and have the greatest ability to adapt to different people's comfort levels and ideals of death. For that reason, green burials are first place in this category. I cannot deny, however, that some religions, such as Hinduism, require a traditional cremation. For people practicing these religions, there is no substitute. Thus, traditional cremations are in second place. In third place, traditional burials. Though no religions require embalming and the extreme casketry that goes into a traditional burial, they are seen as the standard across the US, and traditional burials are widely within popular comfort levels in regards to after-death care. Finally, water cremation is a new and very specific method of body disposal. It does not have any cultural or historical roots, and dissolving grandma's body tissue, then disposing of the sludge in a wastewater system, is out of the comfort zone for many individuals. Water cremations are in last place for this category. According to our point totals, green burials are objectively the best after-death care option. They are reasonably priced, environmentally sustainable, and can be molded to fit different cultural ideals of death. Now, it is important to note that just because green burials are objectively the best way to dispose of a body, does not mean that they are the best way to dispose of your body. See, at the end of the day, the funeral industry is here to make death as comfortable for you as possible. And if you're not comfortable with, as Shannon Paulus so eloquently puts it, a burlap sack buried in the woods, that is perfectly okay. But it is important that we start these conversations around after-death care, because everybody deserves a comfortable and reasonably priced funeral. Death is taboo. People don't want to talk about it. But our current practices just aren't sustainable, and nothing is going to change if we don't inform people of their options and have the difficult conversations. So thanks for joining me on this little death journey today. I hope you learned a little something. Happy Halloween!